basically we realize that the reactions that we're coming up with don't help us. In fact, they're based on outdated information, and then it's just a matter of going into the logic and clearing the data that doesn't serve us any longer.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever and whenever you are watching or listening. This is the Holistic Monitor, and I'm your host, Nick Sconia. The Holistic Monitor podcast is a weekly show featuring guest interviews with discussions about self-discovery, philosophy, spirituality, and our relationship with the world around us. Your support this last year has meant the world to me, and you can now go to holisticmonitor.com to support the topics you want to hear with our new show merchandise, featuring hats, t-shirts, hoodies, and more. You can also support us by simply sharing your favorite episode with your followers. And with that, let's get the show started. Charlie Savill, you are an author of 3 books, and you work specifically in, is it emotional intelligence or emotional strength, or is it both? What would you categorize yourself as?
Yeah, I actually like to call it the intelligence of emotions.
The intelligence of emotions. So more like recognizing the power of emotions and the power that these emotions have over us, maybe.
No, more actually recognizing and engaging with the fact that everything, every feeling we have, every emotion we have, is actually a package of data that we can discover and dive into and reveal what lies behind it.
Okay. So more on like the depths of where something comes from in time, or like what is the source of this emotion in the present time, or how it relates to the past?
You're right. Well, so I think it's both. As we all know, let's talk about perhaps the less comfortable emotions that we have. They will inevitably be triggered in the present. Something someone says, something someone does or doesn't say or doesn't do, that will classically trigger a reaction inside us. So in that sense, the emotions are linked to the present day. But when we dive into and engage with that feeling, we find that it's actually built on a logic that comes from our past, typically from our very formative years.
Yeah, they all seem to stem from usually what I see is 5 years and under.
I think the Jesuit said 0 to 7, wasn't it? So I think 0 to 7, 0 to 8. That's the moment where, for our survival, we're designed to be hardwired by what our parents, our carers are telling us. So if we imagine, we go back long enough where there were predators that could, endanger us, we needed to be able to react quickly to that threat. And therefore, whoever was looking after us, if they said run, that wasn't the time to say, well, why, or is there another way? We just needed to run. So we're actually in terms of brainwaves in pretty much a hypnotic state in those early years. So what we sponge up from our parents or our carers becomes hardwired into us for good or for bad, and then that becomes let's call it our basic software for dealing with the world, unless we change it. And we take that into our adulthood. And then when we are met by something that perhaps doesn't meet with our expectations, someone, as I say, says something or does something, and that presses a button, what's happening is that our subconscious is scanning our past and looking for the best immediate response to that action for us, for our ongoing security. Which inevitably it is according to the logic we bought, but it doesn't mean to say it is the best reaction. It's just like, so we have the survival mode, and that's priority. So it comes up with a message. It doesn't mean to say we have to take that message.
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly. So there's a lot of what does our learned experience tell us, and then are we acting on our best? Are we acting in our current on the best intel from our past? Are we sourcing to the right
the
spot?
best intel?
Yeah.
And I would say that sort of reiterate that is the best intel of how to react for our survival, because that's the kind of the fastest message that needs to come up.
Yeah.
But obviously, most of us, most of the time these days, our survival isn't at risk, and therefore we will find that we can probably react when our buttons are pressed in a more considered, a more sophisticated way than maybe our emotions are suggesting straight up. So it's not that our emotions are wrong, it's just that they're working at a certain priority. The interesting opportunity comes where basically we realize that the reactions that we're coming up with don't help us. In fact, they're based on outdated information, and then it's just a matter of going into the logic and clearing the data that doesn't serve us any longer.
Yeah. Now, you in your books, what is your most current book that you've written?
So the most recent book I did was one on motivation. I think the one closest to my heart is just called Feel, and it's about how to engage with what we feel in order to be wiser, happier, and healthier. And I think perhaps there was a moment some years back which was sort of key for me, sort of going on this journey, and that's when situations conspired to make me feel really very, very lonely. It was a very strong emotion that hit me. But instead of, and I would say it wasn't actually real, it was really a projection, but it felt very real at the time. And, but instead of sort of doing what perhaps I would normally have done, which is either sort of talk myself out of it or try and reason with it or run away from it, I decided to really sit with that feeling, to be with it. In fact, I really challenged it to do its worst with me. And probably after about an hour and a half, and I think it seemed a lot longer, something really miraculous happened, in that this feeling it almost ran out of juice and it disintegrated. And in its place came this incredible peace, this incredible stillness, this silence. It was a silence that was packed full of potentiality. And this was a huge kind of eureka moment for me, because I thought, well, no, wow, that's really so interesting that a feeling can actually take me somewhere, rather than just being this thing that I then had to react to in a certain way. Here it was taking me somewhere, and somewhere amazing. That begged the question to me, well, one, what is a feeling? Yeah. And two, where else can it take me to?
Right.
And from that, I then, decided to put all my time and effort really into understanding what this thing that we call a feeling or an emotion, what is it? What's it capable? What's it really telling us? And I think my starting point was that I had this sort of hunch or thought process, which was, if you look at the first peoples, if we go back far enough, look at pre-language, how did we navigate the world? And I think it was clear to me that our feelings must have played a huge part to this. So if we think about it, there are many plants out there, for example, that are toxic. I didn't believe that mankind kind of navigated their way through what plants to eat on a kind of trial and error basis, because you think of the casualty level would have been very high.
Yeah.
They felt their way. They tuned into a plant and felt whether it was good for them, whether it could heal them, whether it could nourish them. And I came across, there were two researchers, Lynn Gertz and Tom Wolfe. And Tom Wolfe in particular, he wrote, I think it's The Origin of Wisdom. And he basically connected with this tribe in Malaysia called the Sungai, and they live in the jungle. They're semi-nomadic, and he would go into the jungle and meet them and try and discover their ways, which had remained largely unchanged. And funny enough, he was always amazed by the fact that when he went into the jungle, walk for hours in there, he'd always find on the path that he would be met by one of the tribe members. And he would say to them, well, how did you know that I was coming? And they said, well, I didn't know that you were coming, but I felt I had to be at the path here today at this time. So when I read that, I realized, that's it. They really used feeling to navigate literally the world, but also navigate what they eat, what they did, how they acted. And I was thinking a little bit about the name of your show, The Holistic Monitor. We think of being holistic as kind of mind, body, and spirit, or at least that's what I think of holistic tradition is: mind, body, and spirit. How to integrate those.
Right.
But there's also another aspect to holistic, which is being holistic, working not just at where we are culturally and philosophically today, working up in the head most of the time. But we were designed, evolution designed us, nature designed us to work holistically within our body, intellect, heart, and guts, and whole body all working together. And that's what the first peoples did.
Yeah, I mean that is. I think that there's a greater awareness of that now than there was before, because of science kind of catching up a little bit with the metaphysical realms, and science is starting to be able to see into more of that. There is more of an awareness that, yes, we're operating on five senses that are overruling or overriding other senses that are there, that aren't necessarily something we would think of as a sense, but you can have a sense that there's going to be an oncoming deer in the road. That's one I have that I use a lot. I say I would like, subconscious, I would like to know if there's going to be a deer in the road before I get to it, so that I can slow down. All you got to do is call out to me and say deer, and I'll have no idea why I'm thinking of it all of a sudden, but I will slow down. And it seems to be it's worked many times, and I have to be listening. I have to be actively ready to hear such a thing and recognize that my thoughts, all of a sudden, deer comes in, and then recognize that actually is my signal to slow down. But
exactly.
On that same line, it does seem that emotions play a part to that, but a lot of what it seems is that I need to fine-tune the emotions and wield it rather than allow it to necessarily take control, because they seem to want to override or over-experience a moment, or it might shield out other impressions or perceptions that are happening in the field. Are you getting that kind of understanding with emotions, that there's a need for it?
Yes, no. There's no question that emotions can be very powerful, and I think we're also taught to be quite afraid of them, which doesn't help.
Right.
So I kind of go back to that, that story I said where, I had that feeling of loneliness, and I guess my training, my conditioning would be to, in some way, suppress or run away from that. But when I took the time to be with it, and perhaps that's the challenge, isn't it? Is that we live these fast lives, fast and busy lives. That it's quite difficult sometimes to find the time to actually give our feelings the space. Most of the time we get an uncomfortable feeling. We're just like straight away, no, I haven't got time to deal with this. I've got to move on, and then we do.
Yeah.
So what I'm really talking about is when you have a particular emotion, I guess, that you and you don't have to do it at the time. You could think, oh, I'll go back to it later, but at some point to kind of engage with that and just to ask what's going on, what is going on here, and then to find the story. And then if you find that the story is based on a fiction or something that's outdated, to clear the electrical charge that comes with that. So what does that mean? Well, let's say you come back, you're 6 or 7 years old, you come back from school, you show your mother, your father, your test results, they're not great, they've had a bad day, and they snatch it out of your hand and say, you're not good enough. Now, as a child, because your survival is dependent on them, they must be right, otherwise you're in big trouble. So they're right, that means you're not good enough, and you take that in literally, as I say, and it goes in at a hardwired level.
Right.
So now you begin to build your life on that statement, on that understanding. Now, it doesn't always have to be bad. You can build your life to say, I'm going to prove that I am worth something.
Right.
Or you can go, I'm going to prove that I'm not worth anything. But the reality is, either way, that is the wrong information. But it can't, at the time that it came, it's fully loaded, and therefore it creates this charge which becomes frozen in your body, and it will stay there in glorious HD surround sound forever, and forever just be a factor in deciding how you react today, maybe decades later, unless you go back into it and clear that charge. You can't clear the memory. The memory, it is what it is, but you can clear the charge so that it doesn't shape your actions.
Yeah. Yeah, we in our system of SAF, we do something very similar to that, and we could call them dragons. These bound up, but not necessarily just the one event. It's the chain reaction that happens from that one event to another event that's related, creating another charge that gets locked. The experience upon experience, when it comes up over and over again through a lifetime, creates this serpentine appearance of an electrical charge that is binding the emotional energy. And initially I thought it is to slay the dragons, but really it is to tame the dragons. It's more about going in, discharging, taking the power away, right? And then you can't get rid of the memories. In fact, you're empowered by those memories by having control over those memories. Now, what is your method for going back? Let's say you're 40 years old. You have this reoccurrent headache, and it seems to be maybe triggered by some kind of environmental emotion that comes up in you. Something happens around you and you get a headache. Maybe you can link it to fear, let's say. What would be your your way of saying, look, let's investigate this fear and see how we can get rid of the charge.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to, if I may, and keep me on track here,
Okay.
please, but I'm going to answer this question in a slightly roundabout way. So when I was about, I think it was when I was 7, my dad had a catastrophic stroke, and that left him kind of paralyzed on the right-hand side, and he was right-hand sided. He was also a super talented linguist, and he lost probably 80% of his voice capacity.
Wow.
And this set about a kind of chain reaction that sort of wreaked havoc in my life, as well as his, as well as my family's. Later, he and my mother got separated. He went to live with, in fact, his mother in a house, which was actually then a school, like a summer school in England, in Surrey. And I think it was probably in my early 30s. I was driving quite near there with my then girlfriend, now wife, and I just had this idea. Let's go back and see if we can see. I knew the school had since been sold and had been developed into kind of like a housing estate, and I thought, well, I'd really like to see what's left there. So I drove to this place, found it, and sure enough, all these new houses have been built, but they'd left certain. It was a very beautiful, sculpted grounds that had to the school. It was a kind of amazing setup, and they left certain of these features. So I were kind of walking around. Oh yes, I remember that bit. Oh, I remember that bit. And then suddenly I came to this pond, just around a corner, down some steps, and I used to remember seeing these little boatmen, these little things that float on the top of the water, and it had like lilies on it, and it was absolutely unchanged from what I remember, 35 years before. And it just clicked something in me. It opened me up, and I couldn't stop crying. And it was like, for 3 hours, I wasn't even clear what I was crying about, but it felt inside me. There was this huge black space, like a vast space inside me of just never-ending darkness. And I just wept and I wept and I wept until maybe 3 hours later, I cleared it out. And it struck me then how was so much kind of pain, so much charge in my life. I hadn't even been aware. 3 hours before, I hadn't even been aware of it.
Yeah.
So, tying into your question, part of the challenge is that we're so good at concealing the issue. We have this capacity to hide all this pain, hide these electrical charges. So the first thing I think we have to do is we actually have to find out what is the issue here. And this is where our emotions are utterly brilliant. So the process is firstly to get down into our bodies. What does that mean? That's kind of get comfortable, sit in the chair, feel your weight of the body in the chair, do a few nice deep breaths, feel the movement of your body with each breath. That just brings the attention and awareness down into the body. And then we could just ask the question, in the case of your example, what is the emotional issue connected to my headache, and how does it feel? Now, almost certainly, the intellect will start trying to come in with, oh, well, it's because of this, it's because of that. But we're not interested in what the intellect is thinking.
Right.
Because the intellect already hasn't worked it out. We know it hasn't worked it out because we're asking the question. So we're not interested in what the intellect is thinking. We wait until we get a feeling that arises in the body somewhere. Very typically, it'll be like the chest area or the throat area or the gut area. Then there's a really super neat process, which is just, if we describe that feeling, is it round? Is it heavy? Does it have a color? Does it have a texture? What shape is it? That process of description, it's called giving a handle to the feeling. It basically makes it more substantial, more stable, tangible, and something that we can now engage with.
The tangibleness.
So now so now we've got something that we can start talking to. So we can start trying to put a name on this feeling. So we've asked the question, what's the emotion connected to the headache? We've got the feeling, but now we've got to find out what that emotion is, and the feeling will tell us. So we can just sort of start tuning in. And what is it? Oh yeah, it's fear. But hang on, fear's not fear. What fear about what? Because fear is fear doesn't get us really any closer. It sort of points us in the right direction. So fear, what is it? Fear about losing control. Yeah, and you can kind of feel you're getting close, perhaps. I mean, you'll nail it straight away, but you're feeling getting it close. But here's another neat trick: is when you name it absolutely spot on, the feeling will move. So it's fear. Oh yeah, it's fear of being rejected because I'm not good enough. Oh, that's it, and then the feeling moves. Now you're on it. Now you're on the trail, but you're only at level 1.
Right.
So now we want to work down the logic. What's underneath this feeling of fear linked to not being accepted because I'm not good enough? And then bang, another feeling comes in, and you repeat the process. And every time you repeat the process, you'll find it'll come down to a moment. Literally, you could say, when was the first time I felt this feeling? And how did it feel? And it's incredible. You'll feel, oh yeah, I could feel I'm like 6 or 7. Oh yeah. My dad said he'd be at a soccer match. He didn't come, and I felt I wasn't good enough. And now you're at the heat of the moment.
Right.
And then you can work on the heat of the moment. So the beauty there is that you know specifically what issue is causing the headache. Now you can work on a ground level, a foundational level, at what it is that's at the root cause of that.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and that's a good explanation and an exploratory approach to what I would call self-discovery, a means of finding out more about that hidden self. I think people put a lot of mystery around this know thyself, and really this is what we're talking about is
Absolutely.
Uncovering these power centers that are bound up, have been bound up since we were little, and on purpose. I think it's on purpose. It seems to be.
Well, of course, it gets us through life, isn't it? It's our logic of how to protect ourselves, to sail the choppy seas of life.
Right.
And it worked because we got to today.
Yeah.
But the problem is it still relevant?
Yeah.
Is there a better way of looking at it? Is there a better process by which we can deal with the slings and arrows that life throws at us? So you're absolutely right. That is, if you like, is the nuts and bolts of know yourself.
Yeah.
It's understanding what drives you. And there's a couple of other aspects to that which I think are worth mentioning, because in realizing that, so there's a mechanical gain there, which is that we clear the charge, we clear the headache. That's great. Or we clear how we react when someone doesn't do something or says a particular thing. We clear that.
Right.
But there's a secondary gain and there's a tertiary gain. The secondary gain is that we actually see how mechanical that is. That isn't spontaneous living. That isn't our true nature. That's mechanical. It's a program.
Right.
Ideally, what we want to do is we want to come at a situation, someone says something, someone does something, where we're spontaneous rather than acting out of this outdated history. So the more we see how mechanical a lot of our behavior is, the more we can step back from our immediate reaction and go, well, hang on, but actually let's just relax here and feel what's appropriate to react. So that's a kind of second payoff there. The next thing is that there is this other aspect, which is when you get down into that most repressed part, you are at the closest, the thinnest veil between yourself and your, what I would call true nature, your unconditioned self. I'm not entirely sure why it is, but I'm absolutely certain that's the case. So in terms of how do you actually clear that charge, what I do is invite people to connect to a part of them that isn't completely untouched by this story, and indeed any story in their life. There is a part of us that is completely untouched by the dramas of our life. And you can literally feel that. And then by getting the two bits to talk together and to resolve, the bit that is pure is so much more powerful that it will clear that frozen energy every time. But that untouched part is, if you like, I call it the cosmic carrot, the divine part of us, the payoff we get for doing that work. So you go down, it's really incredibly easy to go into that part where we feel unlimited, we feel complete, we feel that divine spark. So there's that other side of know yourself, know thyself, which is not just to see the mechanical side of you, but also to see the divine side of you. And they go hand in hand.
Yeah. That's really good clarity on that process, which now I imagine you work with clients via Zoom all over the world.
So this is the thing that I find amazing, is that, so I put thousands of hours into working with what I can feel. And it's very clear to me that what you can feel is pretty much limitless. And I'm going to take there's a couple of examples I like to draw on this, because I think this is super interesting and important. So you were talking before about kind of intuition. So there's a really neat study that was done, and although the result was that I took from it, I don't think was the purpose of the test, but they basically put a whole lot of kind of what I call human guinea pigs in front of a computer screen, and the idea was to flash up every 20 seconds a random image, and the image would either be a pleasurable image, could be like a little sweet baby or a lovely sunset, or put up a discomforting image, like it could be anything that's going to make the system go recoil a bit. And the human guinea pigs were asked to basically try and guess what the next slide coming, and the slides were completely random, with the next one to come up, would that be a pleasurable or unpleasurable? The intellect got every single one wrong. They couldn't, it was useless and incapable of predicting it. They had the sense, the scientists, the researchers had the sense to wire up the fingers to like a monitor that could sense kind of heart rate, sweat rate, and the body could predict what was coming up.
The body could predict it.
How that makes no sense to us on our current Western model. That makes no sense to us, that our body can predict something that's random. It's kind of similar to your deer in the road thing.
Right.
How is our body able to pick that up? It can. It just can. So it's clear that this capacity that we have, this innate intelligence, or this intelligence of the body, or both, is able to pick up things well beyond our comprehension, well beyond our understanding of how it does that, but also beyond our geographical comprehension.
Oh, absolutely. Right. Yeah, it's not
So,
even located just where you're at. It can sense
no,
things
exactly. It can
potentially
pick up the
cosmically.
deer that's out of sight,
Mm-hmm.
but it just knows.
Yeah.
It's not pattern recognition
Right.
necessarily. It's way beyond that. The other story is that the author I mentioned, Wolf, before, it was Original Wisdom, actually, I think the name of the book. And he, on one of his trips to the Songhai tribe, he became friends actually with a guy called Hamid. They lived in the jungle. They had no concept, no even word. The word ocean didn't even form part of their vocabulary because they had no concept of ocean or sea, because they lived only in the jungle. Wolf was going to the ocean, so he said to Hamid, would you like to come with me? And of course he said, yeah, I absolutely love to come and see what this thing, the ocean, is. So he took him, he went, and Hamid came to the ocean. He stood away from it, up under the shade of the trees, and he just stood there for about 3 or 4 hours, and he just felt the ocean. He returned to the tribe, and then he explained to the tribe all he'd felt. And he said the ocean goes on way beyond what you can see. Even if you went to that point, the limit of what you can see, it goes on way beyond that. It has valleys in it. It has huge beasts that swim in it. He could feel all this. So tuned in are they to their sense of felt intelligence. So we are able to discern through our embodied intelligence, telegraphed to us by what we feel, incredible amounts of things. And I found that I can, when I'm working with people, whether it's in present, physically here with me wherever I am, or on Zoom, I can feel what they're feeling. So if I ask a question, like for example the headache question, I can tune in, even if they can't feel it. I can feel it, and I can help them. So I go, well, why don't you have a look a little bit to the left of your throat, sort of 3/4 of the way up? You might, there you go, I can pick that up now. So yeah, it's incredible what we can feel. And it's like perhaps an unused muscle. If we're not practice at tuning in, we lose it. But if we start tuning in, we start putting in the effort to regain that skill, it's incredible how far it and how quickly it comes back. I mean, I tell you what, after my dad's stroke all those years ago, I absolutely shut down. I could feel nothing. Really, I felt so little. So it was I came from ground zero all the way up. I mean, but it took time. So it is there that anyone can do it if they're willing and interested enough to put the time into it. But the payoff is huge.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that I also like how you mentioned, and that goes into that holistic perspective of body, mind, emotion, and spirit. And when you go back and you are delving into the cause and effect of some issue, that there is an overseer or a universal part of yourself that's also just kind of there with the flow, and is connected. It's the connecting point, but it's not necessarily attached to that drama of the mental emotional trauma that happens and affects the body. It's just kind of watching it go.
I would be even stronger than that. I say it's 100% not touched by that drama.
Right.
There is a higher part of us, a higher intelligence, whatever you call it, a higher energy, and it's just our stories, our dramas. They are incapable of disturbing that in any way. I mean, it's just it's like a little chick, sort of pecking grain from the feet of an elephant. I mean, it just the elephant is totally untroubled by that. It's
because I'd say it goes above. There's a veil between it and this incarnation. if you want to look at it like that, where there's a veil that keeps it unbound from these dramas, with the drama of
Yeah,
life, you know.
yeah, and I think practically, how do I like to think of it? I think that when you um, when you touch that part, when you go into that part, it is it although it's never the same. I always find that there are certain characteristics that are ever present,
Hmm.
and the words complete and the words boundless and limitless seem to be always flavors that are there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, story our dramas are always separate,
Yeah.
and what is to do with separateness doesn't exist in the world of the complete and the boundless and the limitless.
Right.
So they're kind of incompatible um, in the way they operate.
Yeah. I try to rationalize it, and even by going there, I'm already limiting. And I
Of
try to
course.
even put my sense of feeling into it, and I can get the tendrils of it, but then I'm also limiting it because I'm approaching it with a tool, so to speak. Whereas it is part
Yes, I
of the
mean,
being, you know.
I would say that that's absolutely correct. My experience, however, on the feeling side is that it can be quite a neat tool to go deeper, to explore deeper into that thing that we can't put words on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because as one, it is experiential. So it's not in any way is it an intellectual process.
Right.
It is a felt process. So we get these feelings. You can't, when we look at the intellect can come up with words like boundless and limitless and complete, but they're conceptual because
Yeah.
there's something that the intellect actually can't get a handle on. But we can feel them. So our felt sense is able to feel with great subtlety completeness or boundlessness or limitlessness. Um, so it's quite a useful way to navigate that space. When you get a feeling, you can simply ask, well, what's even beyond that feeling? What's deeper into that feeling? What's at the center of that feeling? And that will functionally take you deeper into this space that we can't put a name on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It has a radiation. It has an emanation from it, and that can be felt, like kind of the sun's heat can be felt without seeing the rays, the
Yes, it can be felt. Yeah,
cosmic
yeah.
rays, as it were. And in going through a sorting of somebody's life, what would be for somebody that wanted to work with you? Do you still work with clients, or is this something that you have kind of retired from? And if they did want to work with you, what would be their approach to find you, and to what would be their experience in the beginning part of working with you?
Yeah, so the experience is to get down to brass tacks and actually start seeing the beauty of the process. So it is to explore whatever. In fact, it doesn't even really need to be an issue, because you can just simply ask the question, what's blocking you
Mm.
in your life at the moment, and how does it feel? And the body wisdom will always come up with what it is that needs to be, the number one thing that needs to be dealt with. And then you can simply learn how that process works, and either just be guided through it by someone like myself, or do it yourself as I do it. And I do it on myself every single day. And I love the process. A byproduct of that process is to feel more alive.
Mm-hmm.
It's just every time you go in and you clear a bit of that frozen energy, you become one part more alive. And it just does open you up. It just does really open you up, and it opens your heart up, and it makes the world a much more enjoyable place to be in.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, when did it all start as far as our fall from this connection? We can look back, and we can even look back. We don't have to look back. We can look right now at animals who know what to eat. We talked about herbs and things like that and medicines. Animals know instinctively what is their food and what isn't their food. They're not just dying from eating poison berries. We're disconnected from that. We would go out and we would likely die from trying to read the berry, if that's the right berry or the right fruit to eat. When did this disconnect? Is it known when this started, or what caused the disconnect in us?
Well, I think you've got to look at sort of René Descartes, that kind of philosophy that came in. I think, therefore I am,
Hmm.
and whilst it was well meant,
Hmm.
I think that was the sort of the death of the kind of holistic,
Mm-hmm.
the
The
holistic approach.
separation.
And the reason why he came up with that, and I think it took hold, was because, you know, society was very superstitious then,
Mm-hmm.
and that superstition was, you know, plainly crazy at times. You know, the whole idea of kind of how they dealt with witches and stuff like that, and
Right.
so that introduced the kind of idea that science and the brain, kind of, they were the masters and everything should serve that.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, you know, it's compelling, isn't it? Because the brain is so, it's so quick. It's, you know, our thoughts are so clear, and we can make incredible gains through science.
Yeah.
So I think it was, you know, very compelling. I think then you got things like the Industrial Revolution, kind of, which sort of really took man out of nature, put him into the factory, treated him like a kind of robot. You know, where output was all that was really important.
Right.
And these trends continued. And to be honest, I think things like social media now, although they have their really positive sides, you know, this whole kind of you know, the clickbait, the pings, the never ceasing, what they call the when you're tracking down, is it the, you know, the constant feed? It's never ending. So we're bombarded. Our neurochemistry is bombarded. Our brains are bombarded. We give away our attention so easily on things that have no value. So I think there's that whole progression, which makes it, despite the fact, it makes it, I don't know, it makes it really hard. I was going to say, it makes it really hard to realize the value of tuning in, despite the fact that you see that, you know, that has caused the planet to be in such a precarious state. This kind of head-based thinking. You know, I go back to that, back to the Songoi, and there's the tribe were asked by the government. The government decided they wanted to plant rubber trees in the jungle, and they said, "Oh, we'll clear the jungle, we'll plant the trees, but we'll pay you to get the rubber, to feed the rubber out of the trees." And the Songoi said, "No," and the government, they just couldn't understand it. They were paying them good money. It's an easy job. Just bleed the trees, collect the rubber, and they couldn't understand it. So Wolf got to the bottom of this, and basically he said, the problem was they had an intuitive understanding that the rubber trees robbed the soil of all its goodness. And in fact, subsequently, they did a test and they found that, yeah, after 20, 30 years, the soil has been pretty much, you know, laid bare by these trees.
Right.
To the tribe, this was so an absurd a concept that you would rob the land in order to give you a benefit in the present day. You put your future in jeopardy for a present day gain.
Right.
That was completely moronic to them.
Yeah.
And that is because they're so in tune with what they feel, that their sense of, you know, that of harmony with their environment.
Yeah.
Harmony with themselves, harmony with their environment. And the problem with our head-based thinking is that we've lost that. So we do stuff today that puts the planet and our own wellness in peril.
Yeah. There's, and I believe it's Native American indigenous custom was to act or make decisions based on a 10-year outcome. How will this be in 10 years based on my action? And it's a real understanding of connection, in also that connection to the environment by selecting one plant to overrule a whole area is messing with this natural order and cycle. Choosing one animal to be the animal that you eat, or choosing one plant to take over a whole area, is going to
Exactly.
make the whole thing imbalanced. And when you're working in an ecosystem, you have to have a balance. You have to, I mean, when you're really working with the earth, you really need to make sure things are giving and taking from the soil so that you have year upon year, you have a return. And
Yeah,
that's
let's bring that back to the body, which is
right.
the moment that we become imbalanced, our thinking becomes imbalanced, our actions become imbalanced. So to be harmonious, we need to ourselves be harmonious. We need ourselves to be in tune with all of us, rather than just up here in the head. Otherwise, we're out of sync not only with ourselves but with the world we live in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, there's in the Bible you have the story of Cain and Abel. And this seems to be a really interesting story or tale about the balance of two different professions of life, of how to live your life, and maybe the outcomes of living that life. Whereas one wanders with the animals, the other one is tied to the land and is beholden to the land to learn the cycles of life and of time on a very important scale. One seemed to be favored over the other, and that was farming versus the hunter-gatherer nomad.
Yeah.
And what we get out of that seems to be culture and development and ultimately a separation. But that separation, going as far back as we can go, seems to be based on trade, seems to be based on having a surplus, having too much of one thing and needing to trade it off, and then there needs to be an exchange. And I'm not necessarily going to money, but I mean, it does go to money as being this medium of exchange between two different things. And there seems to be a big separation that happens with that money seems to be an overrider. And I only mean it in the fact that it's separating us from like this one thing that we're doing to all these other potentials, to not even having to farm anymore, right?
Yeah, I think if you work on the basis that you always come from the heart, then you can't go too wrong.
Right. Yeah, in modern times, we're like you were saying, we have all of these different stimuli coming in. I've kind of looked to see how certain senses of ours have been utilized in technology.
Absolutely.
We still have the ability to know who's going to call before they call, but that's definitely gotten muted a bunch because maybe we see them every 20 minutes on Facebook or something like that. We're not hearing it because we're now looking and seeing it all the time. It's just a constant flow of distraction, perhaps, to different senses that we have. Do you have any kind of remedy for this level? Is it just to disconnect or reconnect with ourselves?
I think connect where you really need to connect.
Mm-hmm.
But that I feel squandering your attention on stuff that you'll I mean, no one's going to come to their end of the life surely and say, "I wish I'd spent more time on social media. I wish I'd spent more time on TikTok."
Right.
I I I just think our attention is precious. There is a functional issue here, which is that the brain and the intellect is super quick.
Mm-hmm.
Our felt sense takes a little longer. So if we are going to tune in and get all the benefits, and there are so many benefits of tuning in, if we want to feel more alive, if we want to feel more connected, literally, it's a matter of just giving ourselves a bit more space to kind of see how we're feeling about things throughout the day, rather than spending all our time on devices or engage in things where everything is quick, fast, and very reactive.
Because it also builds into us a habit and a pattern of accepting or wanting that stimulus to maintain that height. It's an addiction of sorts where we kind of get hooked to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, our neurochemistry is, so strong. That's why these social media platforms are, and I'm not against them at all. I think in many ways some of these things are incredible. I've got two daughters who both, young ladies who are able to sell products around the world in a way, when I was young, you could never have done. So they have some great qualities about them, these platforms, but we just need to be careful judicious in how we're using them, and not just to become a slave to them, because it doesn't, it's not deep satisfaction.
Right.
How often do I hear my own daughter saying, "Oh, I wish I'd spent so much time, wasted all that time doing this or doing that," because there's no deep satisfaction from that.
Right. I see it as a tool, and I try to use it most specifically for business. But of course, it's not the era that we're in. You know, if you want to connect with people that you haven't seen, if you want to keep up with them, that seems to be what these tools have adapted to.
And I think that's great. That aspect of the connectivity is great, but we have to be careful that when we're connecting, that is quality connection. I mean, I'm amazed how often I go to a restaurant these days and I see two kids and they're having dinner and they're both on their phones, and I'm going, well, put your phones down and connect with each other.
Right. They're usually chatting with somebody else that's not there.
Yeah, and it's like, or you're watching something on like a movie, and you're on two different, applications at the same time.
Yeah, right.
The quality of your attention is important.
Yeah.
And nothing's more interesting than being with people and engaging with them properly. But that requires, you to connect, to listen, to feel.
What I worry about is the coming generations that didn't have the non-connected life. I have a good portion of my life that was not connected to these distractions. But those that are born in this time are growing up in a world that is completely saturated in themselves, the pictures of or videos of themselves and their friends, and ultimately this otherworldly type of connection. But is it otherworldly? I mean, we would have that connection naturally if we were just within ourselves. But it's almost like a use it or lose it. If we're not using those powers within ourselves of connection, of even psychic connection, of knowing what somebody's thinking, are we losing the ability to wield those parts of ourselves?
Yeah, I think it's a big worry.
Yeah,
I think it's a really big worry, and I think, if you stay in your head the whole time, you become disembodied, and it's not good for your mental health, for your well-being. I really do have concerns about that, and the technology today is so compelling that it's hard to see how you can come up with something other than a good old-fashioned crisis that gets you to go within.
That's right.
That gets you to stop and think. And it's a big problem.
Yeah. And that leads to this other issue that we have, and I call it an issue, is AI, which seems to be a disembodied, incarnate thing that we have and continually develop and build and create that seems to be devoid of the emotional side of all of it. Though it can pretend and act, it has mainly a computer function to it. We can really see a lot about our own self and how we work as a mechanism by looking at the way that AI has developed. But are we dealing with a separate consciousness in AI, or will we be?
Well, I mean, I don't know is the answer to that. I think for me, the important thing with AI is to understand what you want from it and what it gives you. So it does seem on the positive side that AI has the potential to save time and to do stuff that is boring or mundane. So there is a value there, but if you're just using that time saving or taking out the mundane to do other mundane stuff or to do more stuff that's not helping you, then I'm not sure what your gain is. I do think it has a value in, so the intellect will tend to operate in the areas that it feels most comfortable in, as a function of, our brains are very energy inefficient. They use up a lot of energy, and therefore we tend to always be looking for the easiest route, the safest route, what we know. So there was, when the I think so the new program was Alpha Blue, but I think that AlphaGo came out of was it Big Blue or Deep Blue, which was the IBM program that played chess against Kasparov, I guess in the 80s or 90s. And it beat Kasparov, and then they decided to develop it to play Go, which actually is a more intuitive game. And I'm afraid my memory fails me, but it's something like the fifth move of the second game in this tournament, which AlphaGo did win against Lee Sedol, where it's a big event. The match is happening in front of a huge audience of people who love this game Go. And in this fifth move of the second game, the computer comes up with a move that literally the whole audience gasps. It's so, I mean, they think originally that the computer has made a mistake. The move is so outlandish, so untypical of the way Go is played. But in fact, it transpired that it was a winning move. So what the computer had done there through its own self-learning, without the limits of the intellect, is realize there was another way of doing something which was more effective. So in that sense, I think AI can help us. It can help us break out of the box and see things that we find hard to see. Possibly because we don't feel. It may be easier to use our feelings, but in absence of using our feelings to find those things that we haven't seen in our intellect, then I think AI can help. So I think it's a bit like social media, isn't it? I think there are pros and there are cons. What we have to be is very attentive to what does this mean for us as individuals? What does it mean for our happiness? What does it mean for the way we lead our lives? How does it impact on others? Which is kind of, again, comes back to being heart-based, doesn't it? It's actually caring about the impact rather than just going perhaps headlong into it.
There is a need for the heart in our decisions. When we're making that 10-year decision, we need to think of the feeling forward versus just the best course of action. And I think chess would be a really good analytical approach to living life, whereas it's very if you make this move, this is the outcome. I'm not familiar with Go, but that's how I understand it too, the way you described it,
Yes, I
that
would agree
tournament.
with that. And there's nothing, I mean, the analytical approach is a good approach,
Right.
but it's not as good approach as if you come from it from, a felt sense, a heart sense, and a gut sense. It's
Mm-hmm.
when all three are in tune and in harmony, that's when that's a great, conclusion or action to take.
Yeah. And in ourselves, when we can get back to a place in our past that had control over us or had locked up the energy, we want to kind of bring in that whole self. We want to become a whole person. So we want to go to that place and kind of cure it of the response, that emotional response, and kind of bring in a wholeness of now that I'm here, I don't have to be ruled by that decision when I was
Exactly,
7 or whatever.
exactly.
Yeah.
You can take, once you take that charge which is kind of driving the agenda, if you take that out, then you can come back to a point. And as a sort of an aside here, you can literally ask, if you're facing a decision in your life, and I would suggest anyone does this, like a bigger decision in your life,
Mm-hmm.
ask yourself, what do I think about this? How does it feel intellectually? How does it feel at the heart level? And how does it feel at the gut level? And you will, because they want different things,
Right.
you will get three different answers. But what you're looking for is three different green lights. If you have two of them saying green light and one of them saying red light, then unless you're going to have conflict and you're going to have issues there. So the idea is to find out what part, if there is a part that is unsure or doesn't want to do something, then you can get to the heart of the question: what is it? What about this do you not like or do you not want? And it may be, you just want reassurance, or you want this extra thing as well, and then you bring that in, and everything's green light and all to go. Or it may be, no, this, I don't want this because this is not right for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's good. I do that a lot. I kind of weigh out my future. I kind of scan, play out, or, role play into the future to kind of see and assess how I'm going to potentially feel and weigh out these different factors in an outcome that I may be looking to make in the future, and that is it's a good practice. I feel like it's foresight in a sense.
Yeah, it's a great practice, and I suggest it to try it out, to literally be very specific and say, what do I think of this outcome at the intellect level,
Mm-hmm.
and then map that out, log it all, see what comes out, and then do it again at the heart level,
Mm.
and then log it out and at the gut level, and you'll find they are three different things.
Yeah.
And as I say, if all three can be green light, you can be pretty confident that that's a good way to go. Doesn't
Yeah.
guarantee the outcome, but it means that you're coherent.
Mm.
It
Yeah.
means you're aligned,
Yeah. It means that
and that
you're
gives you
moving
much more
forward
power.
with purpose.
Yeah,
Yeah.
purpose and power. Yeah,
Mm-hmm. That's
yeah. I
great.
mean, I think the combination of having power and an open heart, that's an unbeatable combination.
Yeah. No doubt about it. Yeah. Well, it was a great discussion today. It's good having you on the show.
Well, Nick, it's been a great pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
And where can the listeners and watchers, where can they find you, find your work, and maybe get in touch with you for some sessions?
Thank you, Nick. Well, I have a website which is www.embodiedintelligence.world, all lowercase, and that explains everything we've been chatting about today.
That's great. And that's .world, not .com or .net or anything like
No,
that.
.world. Yeah,
Okay. Fantastic. And they can find your books there as well.
indeed.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, Charlie, thank you so much for being on today. And any last words for the listeners?
No, I think we covered a good range, haven't we, today?
Oh,
And
yeah.
I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. Take care.